Hi, I'm Rick Steves. The year 2017 marks the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. In 1517, the German monk Martin Luther collected 95 points to stoke discussion about the corruption of the medieval church. He then nailed his famous 95 Theses to the door of his hometown church in Wittenberg. With that small symbolic act, Luther unleashed a storm of change, kicking off the most important religious event of the last millennium, the Protestant Reformation. To help those interested understand the what's, how's, and why's of it all, we produced a public television special called Rick Steves' Luther and the Reformation. Before you watch the documentary, here's a little background. The Reformation, even if you're not a Lutheran, was a very big deal. As 2017 approached, I wanted to contribute to our society's appreciation of this event on its 500th anniversary. My mission? To produce an hour-long documentary which would be useful for Lutheran churches, other Protestant churches, Roman Catholic churches, and also for secular media. I wanted the film to be a teaching tool for churches and also to have broad appeal for broadcast on public television, reaching far beyond a Sunday school audience. There have been good movies about Martin Luther, but I planned a broader coverage, explaining the historic, economic, and social context of the Reformation and how this tumultuous age helped Europe leave the Middle Ages and enter our modern age. Writing the script was a wonderful challenge. Church scholars helped me by reviewing it. Their concerns were generally that I'd left out or covered too thinly topics that they felt should have been included. But you can only fit 6,000 words into a 1-hour TV show, and the script filled up quickly. To add even another phrase would mean dropping something else. You can't just talk faster. In the end, it was good discipline to limit the program to an hour. Weaving the story of Martin Luther into the big historic sweep, we dealt candidly with Luther's human foibles and weaknesses. His authenticity is endearing. We followed the tortured path of a troubled young monk as he fought depression, walked from Germany all the way to Rome to sort out his feelings, climbed the holy stairs on his knees, struggled to make sense of it all, and eventually became the great reformer. As a tour guide and travel teacher, writing the script provided an opportunity to explain concepts people may have heard but didn't really understand. Concepts like relics, purgatory, indulgences, iconoclasm, and to delve into the Counter-Reformation, the 30 Years' War, and Lutheran notions like the priesthood of all believers. I'm a proud Lutheran, and my friends in public television were wary of an overtly religious program. Several times, early drafts of the script came back to me with notes along the lines of, "Be careful that you're not proselytizing." I took this advice seriously. We dealt with complex issues, both historical and religious, in simple and concise terms, which, if you're not careful, can be inaccurate or misleading. Theological concepts like Luther's 3 pillars, by Scripture alone, by faith alone, and by grace alone, would have been interesting for some, but a complete turnoff for many. The only fundamental bit of theology I felt we really needed to include was Luther's epiphany of the good news. That's when he discovered in the Bible the idea that people can't earn salvation, but that they're saved by faith alone. We were careful to write the script so that Roman Catholics would also find the program useful and constructive. For example, when criticizing the church, we were careful to call it the medieval church rather than the Catholic Church. And we made a strong point to acknowledge the work of other reformers. Reformers like Erasmus and Francis Xavier, who worked for change but stayed loyal to the Roman Catholic Church. To ensure that we'd strike the right balance, we carefully vetted the script with Lutheran scholars, Catholic scholars, and secular scholars. And as scholars like to point out, many beloved bits of the Luther lore are most likely romanticized or even just legends. Did Luther literally hammer those 95 Theses onto that church door? We'll never know for sure. But if these tales are part of the popular consciousness, and they're not incorrect in spirit, I generally kept them in the story. In preparing the show, a common question I got was, are you going to talk about Luther's poor treatment of the Jews? And the answer, of course, was yes. Luther was angry with Jews for not accepting his theology, and he wrote hateful pamphlets lambasting Jews in harsh and crude ways. And we included that unapologetically in the program. I'll admit the show is dense, and for many, viewing it will be demanding. I'm thankful that in public television we can assume a 1-hour attention span. These days, this show would not see the light of day anywhere else on the dial. Most of my TV programs on European travel are easy to make fun to watch. Fun-loving people, great art, decadent dining, vivid travel experiences, from the beaches of the Riviera to the scalps of the Alps. But this Luther special was tougher. While it's mostly static, with few ways to inject liveliness, the original art, intimate artifacts, gorgeous German townscapes, and a fascinating story all combined to help make it both entertaining and interesting. We try our best to minimize the time spent with me on camera. I generally open and close each show with an on camera, and then I only talk to the camera for topics that are challenging to cover with beautiful images. As you can imagine, our Luther program included lots of substantial on-cameras explaining historical and theological bits that just couldn't be illustrated with footage. As you watch, I hope you'll notice how we worked really hard to make each on-camera setting gorgeous and to craft fun and tight ways to explain those complex historic points. To produce the show, we shot for 10 days in Germany and 2 days in Rome. Our regular crew, that's producer Simon Griffith and cameraman Peter Rummel, was joined by Tim Frakes. Tim was the producer and videographer for our Opening the Door to Luther show, which he and I produced for the Lutheran Church about 15 years ago. And my co-writers back home in the office, Gene Openshaw and Cameron Hewitt, they contributed mightily to the script. I'm thankful to those collaborators and many more for the way our program turned out. I must also thank my team for their strength in reining in my geeky fandom of all things Luther. For example, I insisted on being filmed as I played Luther's beloved hymn, A Mighty Fortress, on the pipe organ, but in the end, my producer Simon wisely nixed the idea of including that little performance in the program. It was fun to include a little travelogue material filmed on location in Germany. The Luther sites in Erfurt, Wittenberg, and the Wartburg Castle are great to visit. The amazing Luther House in Wittenberg is a treasure trove of artifacts, and we spent hours there filming paintings, woodcuts, and historic items that helped us illustrate details throughout the script. And you'll see Germany's most beautiful little walled town, Rothenburg, which happens to be perfect for portraying Germany in the days of Luther in the 30 Years' War, throughout the program. That's where we filmed most of those generic on-cameras. Just like we have Civil War reenactors here in the United States, Rothenburg has 30 Years' War reenactors, and in exchange for giant mugs of good beer, the entire fun-loving army suited up and marched into battle for our camera. As a tour guide and teacher, I've honed the art of seeing an historic event not only from my own 21st century perspective, but also by imagining myself in the context of where and when the event took place. From our modern point of view, a monk translating the Bible into German from the Latin may seem like no big deal. But to imagine it from the perspective of Jan Hus, for example, the Czech reformer who tried to accomplish what Luther did, but a century earlier, he failed and was burned at the stake. That's our challenge. To explain the courage and public relations brilliance of Luther 500 years ago, standing up to power, a simple monk defying the emperor and the pope, gives this story extra punch. Wrapping up the documentary and bringing it all the way to the 500th anniversary year of 2017 was a challenge. For a dramatic finale, I imagined Pope Francis and the presiding bishop of the Lutheran Church, Elizabeth Eaton, doing a happy theological high five. But that wasn't to be. Even so, Catholics and Lutherans alike can look back over 5 centuries and be thankful for the bold work Luther and the other great reformers did to help modernize the medieval church. In fact, that's exactly what Pope Francis and Bishop Eaton recently did together in Sweden. In our age, Lutherans, Catholics, and everybody else can come together to celebrate the tolerance and mutual respect the various Christian denominations now share. With this documentary, I'm honored and thankful to make a small contribution to the celebration of the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. Thanks for your interest in this fascinating and important chapter in both the history of the Christian Church and the story of our Western civilization. I hope you enjoy the show.